promoted, and I think they remain incredibly influential.
Well, so let me ask a question about kind of media, good or bad, because on the one hand, I think Philip is making the point that we live in such a powerful media environment. To despair of your capacity as an individual to make a difference seems unnecessary, except that what you might say is no individual voice matters very much anymore. Now, I've just been hearing from White House officials who I've been talking to for an article that I'm writing, identical line, which is the reason why Obama encounters such heavy weather, the reason why he can't get people to buy into his, we were talking about foreign policy initiatives, is we now live in a media environment that is so intrinsically toxic that it's not even about Obama and not even about his policies, but any president henceforward, they would have said probably the last couple of years of Clinton, George W. Bush, and now Obama increasingly, any such figure will no longer be able to enjoy anything like the authority, the sense of authority and legitimacy that his predecessors have, because every word he utters is immediately dismantled, scrutinized, exposed, ridiculed, and so forth. Is that a travesty of the world we live in, or is there some truth to that?
You know, I find it really ironic that the man who was basically thought of as the first social media president is now whining about this.
I didn't talk to him. He wasn't whining, but his people were whining.
No, but I mean, you know, social media giveth and social media taketh away. You know, something. It may not just be the media. It may be his authority as president.
Oh, there may actually be substance involved here. You're saying?
I am.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but let's talk for a second on this subject about the revelations of surveillance and so forth that have become so much a part of our world. So, Bill, you were the editor of the Times when the WikiLeaks thing happened. WikiLeaks now seems like some remote event that we can't quite remember what it was about. At the time, it seemed like the end of the world. Has that actually turned out to be a less consequential event than it was imagined at the time?
Well, it only seemed like the end of the world within a certain media bubble, I suspect, like in the newsroom of the New York Times and the State Department in particular. No, I think that was one step in a series of steps that has led to where we are today. Before that, the Times published sort of 7 years before Snowden, the revelation that the NSA was tapping our phones without a warrant. WikiLeaks came along and laid bare how we conducted our foreign policy and our military policy. Snowden came along and opened the door even wider. And so there's this kind of ongoing tension between the people who want to keep the secrets and the people who want to expose the secrets. And it's not clear to me that either side is absolutely winning, because we haven't seen any particularly dire consequences of the exposures that you referred to. But it's a war.
But so it's also interesting that after the Snowden revelations about the NSA surveillance, there was a strong sense that now that the American people have discovered these dire secrets, things will change. And there were the things that usually happen. There was a high-level panel, which made a report to the president accepted some things and then didn't accept others. And now the effort seems to have stalled. The leading members of Congress have said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I wonder what this tells us about, whether this does tell us anything, about the national attitude towards these kinds of revelations, towards the fact that we live in a world where we can no longer assume that our emails and other communications are secure. Maybe it's something that, in fact, people accept because they've already accepted it in the private sphere, and though it was a big news event, it's actually not as big a social event as we thought.
Oh, I would disagree with that. I think there are tremendous concerns about privacy. And just this week, just yesterday, 2 days ago, we saw Twitter threatening to sue the government to release information to its users about government requests for user data. The social media companies aren't actually that social themselves, so they're clearly doing this in response to concern among their own users. I think there's a tremendous.
But how do you think this is going to work out? That is, do you see the line for what is acceptable for either the state or private companies to know about us being pushed back? Because now that people understand that they've surrendered this stuff, they're not going to accept it?
You know, I don't see how that's really going to change, but I think that people are going to be much more careful about their own practices, and then this, of course, raises, you know, issues in terms of our dealing in a globalized world, particularly, let's say, in Europe, where there is a huge transatlantic tussle about privacy issues, and countries like France and Germany take a much different view than our government does, and Germany in particular, because of their own historical records of over-record keeping in the Nazi era and in East Germany. So these are issues that take on sort of policy concerns as well.
So Gideon, you talked about this a little bit in your talk, and in terms of the balance between these new media being liberatory technologies and these new media being instruments of authoritarian control, is it clear to you which one has the upper hand or will have the upper hand?
No, I think in the long run, on balance, the liberating aspects will be the control aspect, just because it disaggregates power.
Speak into the microphone.
I think in the long run, on balance, the liberating aspects will be greater than the controlling aspects, just because it'll ultimately be many-to-many communication in many different ways and many different things. And I'm more with the Shirkies than the Morrisons on this, if people call that kind of debate. I think that you know, this ties actually into the debate about the next generation, because I don't think, I mean, one of the striking things about the next generation is that they are growing up with a degree of public self-exposure that most of us over 30, let alone over 40 or 50, find absolutely appalling, and yet they take it in stride. And what that will mean, you know, they may be, the concept of privacy doesn't seem to exist for those kids as much. So whether the government violates it, since they're violating it themselves so often, it may not be as big a deal. I don't know. I don't think we're anywhere near the end of the story. We're just in the early stages, as you say, not just a cat and mouse game about who's doing what and will get what, but in about social attitudes towards this. The idea, I can't even frankly imagine what it would be like to date. I've been married for 20 years, right? The idea of, if, you know, when we're on the dating scene now, and you could literally Google anybody you dated and have their entire life pretty much revealed to you, how would that affect? It's like, I can't even imagine that, because it's so different from what was true back in the day when I was doing it. And the idea of growing up where you could literally have your entire life revealed on social networks and somebody else wanted to know about you, that's a new world that our kids are growing up in, and what that implications are for their attitudes on a whole range of things, I think I have no clue about. But I know it's different from the old users.
Yeah. Okay, let's just go ahead and then
I'm just saying, I just want to add one thing, which is that there are new technologies that are being created to avoid detection. So the protests that we saw in Hong Kong, the messaging system that they used was something called Fire Chat, which is something that you know, is off the grid and can't be, you know, detected or tapped into. And so, you know, in the Cold War era, we used to talk about the nuclear arms race. Now I think there's a kind of digital tech arms race going on between the creators of new technologies, which are trying to be ever more elusive from prying eyes, and governments and corporations who are trying to sort of find ways to tap into that information.
Bill, what about in terms of the press? That is, here we've elected this president who's a constitutional law professor, and everybody assumed that he would be a tremendous change in terms of press freedom issues from George W. Bush, yet nobody has prosecuted reporters more than this guy by an order of magnitude. Is that because it's this guy, or because something has changed in a way that has altered the relationship between the press and their sources?
I think there are a number of factors at work. One of them is that Democrats have to be more Catholic than the Pope on these issues, or feel that they do. And so what you might have expected them to be a little more easygoing about the leaking of secrets. On the contrary, they're proving their manhood by indicting whistleblowers. Another factor
So
is...
we should elect a Republican next, because they won't have to prove their manhood on this one.
Personally, I have a much better relationship with the Obama administration than with the Bush administration, but that's just me. But one other factor is, the technology that has contributed so much good to the world has also made it much easier to track down whistleblowers and leakers. Birds got to sing and prosecutors got to prosecute, and if prosecutors can do it without having to subpoena reporters anymore, or as much as they used to, because now they've got an electronic track of where every potential leaker has been and who he's been in touch with, it's a lot easier to prosecute.
And sort of this goes to the other side of Gideon's hopeful view. That is, you're also saying in this case, the technology has the effect of actually restricting the sphere of freedom.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Gideon that in the sort of contest between control and liberation probably triumphs. I have some doubts that this is an unalloyed good thing, or that it doesn't come with some potentially unsavory consequences. I think the digital age has contributed to a polarization of our society. I think it's probably shortened our attention spans to some detrimental effect. It's also inevitable, so those downsides are the price we pay.
I want to ask about something else Gideon raised. So in kind of a catalog of things that we have trouble admitting to ourselves are actually really positive, but are, one he mentioned was fracking, and the whole idea that energy, which appeared to have been a scarce resource in a way that would really redound to the Americans' detriment, is turning out to be a more abundant resource in a way that redounds to America's benefit. So, Carolyn, since that's, again, it's a world you know well, the energy-producing world of Central Asia and Russia, should we regard this as a tremendous opportunity for the United States to be able to escape a lot of the things that have restrained it, whether it's relations with the Saudis, whether it's even possibly Europe's dependence, parts of Europe's dependence on Russia, that this world of greater energy abundance is actually going to change political things in a positive way?
Well, Gideon already said it. It already has. So, and I think I think people sometimes don't realize what has happened in the United States since 2006. I mean, we produce 70% more oil than we did. We are close to producing 9 million barrels a day. We are already starting to export crude oil, and we're only going to export more in the future. We are, producing a tremendous amount of natural gas. We are seeing, we're seeing tremendous tectonic shifts in terms of our energy landscape. And if you think back even in terms of sanctions against Iran, sanctions against Russia, I think that the United States, having this tremendous energy abundance has given it much more teeth to be able to implement these sanctions in a way that the United States has added 4 million barrels a day. So if you, for example, just look at the the headlines over the last year, in 2007, you would have assumed that what we're seeing today was then. Oil would be at $200 a barrel. The price of oil is going down. That's extraordinary. So in terms of what's been lost in Syria, what's been lost in Iraq, what's been in Libya, the United States has made up for all of the lost global output. And Gideon had mentioned something about that trust experts. They're not always right, but when we go back to 2004, where the the forecast was for the United States was running out of oil, the world was running out of oil, that we were seeing peak oil, and that the United States we were preparing to import liquefied natural gas. Now we are frantically trying to get it out to export.
So let me ask you,